Hi, and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, neurodiversity, and long-term health conditions in the British higher education system. I'm Kath, and this week I am joined by Ari. Ari is a PhD student researching the syntax of Indigenous languages over in Australia. However, he started his academic career over in the UK where we became good friends. I have been looking forward to having him on for a while, and I am really excited to get to it. So, Ari, please can you introduce yourself and share a little about your background in higher education?
Hi, I'm Ari Warrington. I studied a Bachelor of German and Linguistics and then a Masters of Linguistics at the University of Oxford. I'm currently studying for a PhD, still in linguistics at the University of Melbourne. When I'm not working with the syntax of Indigenous languages, I love spending time outdoors, spending time with my family, and I also am a keen D&D player and a proud trans man. So I think that's me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast and to hang out with Kath.
Absolutely. We always need an excuse to hang out, especially since you moved. We haven't really called enough. So this is...
I know.
Yeah.
It's been bad, but we're here now and I'm excited to get going.
Yeah, it's a wonderful excuse. Right. If you are comfortable saying, how did your disability impact your experience of higher education?
Yeah, so I experience a couple of different disabilities. So I'm on the autism spectrum, and in the past I've suffered relatively severely to varying degrees of severity with my mental health. This has kind of impacted my experience in higher education in a variety of different ways. The most pressing one has been just around energy and ability to focus. I sometimes find it really difficult to work, or sometimes I get into the flow of work so hard that I find it difficult to kind of take care of myself. And balancing that has been kind of the key to getting through higher education relatively successfully and relatively intact. So in addition to that, sometimes interacting with other people. Part of higher education is, the study that you're doing, but also working with tutors, working with other students, interacting and navigating that space. And so some of the difficulties, part and parcel of being on the autism spectrum, is understanding what it is that people want from you and what it is that they mean when they're actually saying to you. And so a part of my experience in higher education, I wouldn't say it's all of it, has been learning a lot of how to collaborate with people in the best way and meeting them in the middle point where I still understand what's going on and they can understand what's going on with me.
Yeah. And the thing is, that isn't just academic either, right? Like that's pretty much
No,
everything.
and exactly. And so that's an experience that I had learned just, being a person in society, and then navigating higher education means that I get to do that in a little more of a professional sense. Because if you're doing it just with your friends or in your high school, there's a very different power dynamic than there is to being at a university where, you're calling your tutors by your first name, you know them relatively well, you're working with them in a one-on-one or one-on-two setting like you are at Oxford. And so just learning that and being able to take that into, my PhD, where I'm working with my supervisors or even working with other students now. So it's been a valuable experience. I would not say it's always been easy. But I think it's one that if you're navigating a disability or even just a person, you have to be able to work through at some point in your life in order to be a functional member of society. As much as I would love to just retreat into the woods with my syntax, unfortunately, that's not always the case.
You got to come out periodically to collect the textbooks and the new journals and the...
Yeah, and, talk to people and do fieldwork. So part of my research, I'm going to head out and do fieldwork. And so part of what's been happening this year is learning how to collaborate with speakers, how to treat them respectfully, and how to make sure that you're treating the data that you're gathering and the people that you're working with the respect that they deserve.
Yeah, especially because you're working in Indigenous communities, right? So you're going out and doing the field work there.
Yeah, and anytime you work with Indigenous communities, there's an additional element of cultural safety. I'm always very aware of I'm coming in as, a white man and an academic, and historically those communities have not had good experience with white male academics. And so being aware at every point, what is the image that I'm projecting to these people, how can I best amplify their voices? Because ultimately, it's not about me; it's about what the community wants. What are they willing to share with me, and how can I give back in that aspect? And so that's a little bit difficult when you have the kind of social difficulties that you might experience on the autism spectrum. But I think part of being autistic is also, for me, I have a very strong sense of social justice. I have a very strong sense of doing what I feel is right. And so that's often a big drive of why I'm doing it, is going, okay, I think this is the right thing for me to do. I think this is a calling that I have, and I want to put the energy that I have into doing this right.
Yeah. No, your work is wonderful. Hopefully we touch on it a little more later, but obviously you've kind of been working on this kind of stuff for a while. So I saw like your master's
to varying
presentations.
degrees.
Yeah. It's super interesting. So I wanted to just chat about kind of accessing higher education for you, for our next question. So what was it kind of like accessing higher education from like that kind of autism standpoint? And obviously, so you study in Australia right now. You moved to the UK from Australia to start your bachelor's. Was your experience of accessing higher education also kind of affected by that? Feel free to tackle these in any order.
Yeah, so at the time that I applied to study for my bachelor's when I was finishing high school, I wasn't really aware that I was on the autism spectrum. I just thought that this was kind of the way that I was, or I had an image of autism that was very much the classic kind of Napoleon Dynamite sort of style. And I went, I have really meaningful friendships, and I'm able to communicate with people in a way that's not this image of Napoleon. And so I'm not autistic. This is the way that I think. So when I was applying, I was still going through the disability advisory service and getting support plans in place, but that was through like for my mental health. In terms of my experience, I found it, and this is a huge blessing, actually relatively positive. I reached out as part of my application process. They ask you, do you have a disability? I said, I've had difficulties with my mental health in the past. These are some of the things that I experience. Got a letter from, I think, my GP or a psychiatrist, just to verify that, this is what's going on with me, which is a whole different thing in and of itself. But fortunately, I and my family were kind of in the financial position to be able to afford that. And putting that in and working with the Disability Advisory Service, they actually came with some great suggestions for the things that they could do for me, because I wasn't really sure. I had a few little provisions I studied the International Baccalaureate when I finished high school. And I had provisions in that, but they were coming with a few different provisions and just suggestions. So one of the ones that I was really keen, and they just offered to me without me asking for it, was this concept of mentoring, which is something where it's not just for students, I think, with mental health challenges, but with other students. It's when you go into a system, you're having mental health difficulties, often with university counselling services, they can only see you for a certain number of sessions. I think it's 6 or 8, depending on the service. And that's understandable. They have a huge volume of students they want to see. But at a certain point, they refer you over to private practice. And the thing that mentoring does, at least at the University of Oxford, is that they assign someone to you that works with you to manage your long-term symptoms, rather than going, okay, let's dive deep into what might be affecting you. Let's, work this out. Let's dive into your past trauma, going, okay, you have a long-term condition. Let's manage the symptoms of that. And that wasn't something that I was aware was possible. And the minute that they offered that to me, I went, yes, 100%, let's jump on that. And I was assigned a mentor through the Disability Advisory Service, and I had her for all 6 years that I was at Oxford. And that getting that in place early was so important. I think I saw her the second week that I was in Oxford because I was feeling homesick. And then I saw her just before I graduated. And so having that long-term relationship that was just offered to me the minute that I completed the paperwork correctly was really valuable.
Yeah, if anyone's listened to multiple episodes of the podcast, like some of them I do mention my own mentor as well. Oxford have like good mentors. It isn't just an Oxford thing, so I have one at York as well. But because I personally got my diagnosis quite late, I never really had them for an extended period of time. It was like 3 months at the end of my bachelor's. But in Oxford, that's when I ended up getting mentorship as well, and it's wonderful. Like it's really really good, super valuable.
Yeah, I really encourage anybody listening, or even if you're, from an institution, to look into programs like mentoring, because it's so valuable just to have someone who is paid to listen to your small problems. Often it would just be, hey, I'm finding it difficult to do laundry, or I'm finding it difficult to pay rent. And my mentor would just stay on the call with me. We would meet remotely, would just stay on the call with me while I have banking on my phone. They would just say, hey, get up your banking app on your phone and pay rent while you're on the call with me, and then we can move on, because clearly this is agitating you. But let's talk it out. If I was having an issue with a tutor or with a friend, having someone that is just, it's their job just to listen to you was so invaluable.
Do you get
Yeah,
it?
I think that's all I can have to say.
Yeah. Do you get mentoring kind of over in Australia now, or is it something that's offered?
To my knowledge, this isn't a program that's offered at the University of Melbourne. They offer regular counselling services, and there are a few other things that they offer, particularly in sort of exam spaces, library loans, and a few other things. When I was applying, because mentorship wasn't a program that I knew that existed, and because so many PhD students exist somewhere on the spectrum, I figured what was more important to me was having a good relationship with my supervisor. Um, I am doing a tiny bit of coursework, but at the end of this year, that all wraps up, and I'm just entirely focusing on my thesis. So I declared that I had a disability as part of my application, but I didn't necessarily make a lot of requests for different accommodations, simply because a lot of the things that I needed accommodations for no longer existed in my program of study. A lot of the things around, I had extended library loans, I had the ability to access lecture recordings, I had the ability to ask for condensed reading lists, I had some exam accommodations, and then I had mentoring. And a lot of those don't exist anymore. I don't need anymore, because my library loans automatically renew. That's just a university policy. I'm not doing any exams. I'm not really getting any reading lists to write any regular essays, and all lectures are recorded by default.
Gorgeous. But I'm glad that's worked out. But yeah, definitely like supervisor relationships, because I've been looking for that at the moment, applying for PhDs, and I've seen it happen firsthand to other people. I can see that that would be like absolute priority for PhD.
100%. And I mean, the reason I'm at the University of Melbourne is because of my supervisor. My primary supervisor is a wonderful researcher who's very, very well regarded, and came highly recommended as someone who not only was a very intelligent and talented academic, but someone who was very well respected as a kind person who was good to her students. I have a lot of praise for her. She's won an award from the University of Melbourne for Best Supervisor. She's graduated a lot of students. And so that was a big part of me coming, was going, this is the most important relationship I'm going to have in my life, probably for the next 4 years. I want to make it a good one.
That's wonderful. Oh, I'm so glad, dude. Right. Next question. Feel free to use as many examples as you want, or as few examples as you want. Did you encounter any obstacles during your experience of higher education? Did you manage to overcome them? And if so, how?
There are a few, I'm just going to kind of move chronologically through them. There are a few minor system pain points that happen, just being a part of a university like Oxford, which is organized in such a unique way. The first one that comes to mind was I had the ability to access lecture recordings, but a lot of lectures are not in rooms that are set up to record once you leave the prelims level. A lot of lectures, once you hit the second year, third year, final year level, are in small rooms because they're classes of maybe 5 to 8 people, and a lot of those rooms aren't set up to record. So this right that I had to access recordings wasn't valid because there was no ability to record. There are a great number of rooms that are not set up to record. And that was realizing that was a bit of a letdown. Knowing that there was a resource that I had a right to access that didn't exist. And even in particular instances where I would have a lecture at 9 a.m. and then a tutorial at 10 a.m., And the lecture at 9 a.m. was moved from in the faculty building, which was 2 minutes from where the tutorial was being taken place, out to over the other side of town. So I had to make a choice. Obviously, I'm going to go to my tutorial. That was moved to a room in a college that in no way, shape, or form was ever going to have been set up to record. And so I just had to miss that lecture. Even the lectures that were captured, the lecture capture system is really opaque and difficult to navigate sometimes. So that was kind of the first pain point, was having a right to something and that something being either very difficult to access or not existing, and learning, okay, I'm just going to have to work off the PowerPoint slides, or if the PowerPoint slides are unhelpful, I'm just going to have to teach this to myself. Fortunately, I'm relatively good at self-directed learning, so that was kind of the way that I went through it, was thinking I will access as much as I can from what's available. And if not much is available, I will sit down and just teach it to myself, knowing that if I didn't teach it to myself, nobody else would. And that's a real motivator. And relying then also on the tutorial system as a fallback, because the lectures aren't going to cover everything that's in the tutorials. But the tutorials often will go into much greater depth than the lectures ever will. Part of the beauty of the Oxford system is you get this kind of one-on-one or one-on very small group attention. And so following up with tutors going, I don't understand this topic a little bit, being able to advocate for myself and saying, I need a little bit more help with this. What are some resources that you can direct me towards, so that I can understand this a little bit better? The biggest obstacle that I faced was going on my year abroad. So if you study modern languages at Oxford, and I think in a lot of other universities, you go on an exchange for a year, which is a fantastic immersion experience. You get to meet a lot of new people. You get to spend time in the language. It was really good for my language skills. I went in late 2020 until mid 2021, which I think everybody who's listening can understand is perhaps not a great time to be in a foreign country where you're not speaking your native language. And because of the uniqueness of Australia's COVID strategy, I left and the borders closed. It was a very complicated and difficult situation where I would have had to, pay and to isolate in a hotel room for 2 weeks. If I wanted to come home, those spots were very limited and they were very expensive. So when I left, I made a commitment to stay in Germany for as long as I possibly could, knowing that the exit strategy kind of wasn't there. The difficulty of being on exchange is that you're not really a student of the university that you're at, and you're not really a student of the university that you're enrolled in. So what kept me afloat when I was really struggling with feelings of isolation, poor mental health, a lot of the difficulties that everybody faced during the pandemic, it was the pandemic, was the individual efforts of people who did not have to do it looking after me. So I stayed in contact with my mentor, not super regularly, but enough that I could establish my own safety network and begin to see my own medical team privately, not through the university, just because those provisions weren't necessarily there for me. And she didn't have to do that. I don't even know whether I was enrolled as one of her students during this time period. I think technically we did still have a session allowance, but it was the individual impetus of people who were legitimately concerned for my well-being, and when I reached out, made an effort to make sure that I was doing okay, that really meant that I was able to get through it. They didn't have to do that, or I guess they felt like they did, but the university policy is just that you're in this sort of limbo where I think if you end up with someone unhelpful, they would go, hey, talk to the people that you're on exchange with. Can they give you any services? And that's not necessarily the most helpful experience in the world if you're someone who's really struggling and you're just reaching out to someone familiar for help. Fortunately, I paid a lot of money in health insurance while I was there, but that meant that a lot of the treatment that I was seeking ended up being free. And that was kind of the way that I was able to overcome that, was being able to advocate for myself, getting through long enough with the systems that I had established back in Oxford to establish my own system of support over in Germany, and being able to, reach out to people and say, I need help. This is not working. And part of that, this is not a great way. I don't recommend people doing this, is knowing that I didn't have another choice. I could call my family, but it was going to be very difficult to go home. So I always had this in the back of my mind going, okay, you have to fix it. There's no one else that's going to fix it for you. And that is a terrifying decision to have to make. It's, I think, one that often people can get really paralyzed. But I was very fortunate to have enough energy and to have good people around me, to have good friends around me who would uplift me just long enough that I could get in the door at a doctor or at a psychologist. To make sure that I could get through it okay. But that was the real difficulty, was kind of being caught between these two institutions where I'm not really enrolled at one, but I'm also only provisionally, I'm on the roll as a student, but I'm on my year abroad. What are they supposed to do? And with COVID and everything that was happening, they had a lot of, they had a lot of balls in the air. They had a lot of students who were going home, getting stuck in all sorts of places. I mean, this was back in the day that they used to send people to Russia. And then obviously, due to geopolitical events that year, that stopped as well. So that's a pain point in the system that I don't necessarily see a way out of, but is one that affects a small group of people, but in a particularly difficult way. Knowing that you need your own support systems and then just kind of suddenly vanishing and having to make your own. The final one that I'll just briefly touch on is I had some tutors who were wonderful, who worked really well with my style of learning and communication, and I had some who didn't. I'm not going to name any names, but there's often a conflation that happens of people thinking that really brilliant researchers make really brilliant teachers. And that's not always the case. Communication styles sometimes clash. Sometimes people just aren't good communicators, no matter who they're talking to. But for me, really needing clear communication, there are some tutors I had that were not clear communicators. And the only thing that you're able to do in retrospect is just to give feedback on their teaching and hope that someone else gets through it. And that someone else gets through to them and is able to communicate with them that their teaching style isn't helpful. So that was the only way that I was really able to overcome and work through it, is going, I hope that when I give feedback at the end of this person is going to receive this and make adjustments to their teaching so that other students who have the same communication difficulties that I do don't then have to experience this. I don't know to what extent that's successful. That's the most frustrating thing, is it's often people's own impetus to change and to take the feedback that you're giving. But just having to push through saying, I need this subject to graduate. I can't transfer to another subject. I am the only person that's going to be able to take this exam. I simply am just going to have to work through it. So again, falling back on the ability to teach myself things and really venting to my mentor about how deeply frustrating I found the experience. And that's something that is very easily preventable. Just having regular teacher training, people understanding different communication styles of their students is something that I think everybody who teaches in any kind of institution should know, but unfortunately isn't necessarily widespread. The way that I was able to keep going was the people around me very patiently listening to me rant and rave about how deeply infuriating I found the experience, and then deciding that I was going to do it essentially out of spite because I had to.
Yeah, I to be fair, knowing the context of this, it wasn't so much that you were ranting as that it was a bit of a shared cathartic experience.
Reaching out to people who are having the same experience, shared pain is often such a valuable thing. Connecting with other people who maybe aren't even disabled or on any kind of spectrum, but are having the same difficulties with the people who are teaching you is so valuable, just to go, okay, it's not all in my head. This is actually someone that is for whatever reason, not getting through to us in the way that they need to get through. But it's okay. We're not being crazy. We can uplift and support each other. Having community is such an important factor of getting through anything that's difficult, not just disability related.
No, absolutely. And it's you have to hope it just gets through at some point, and you just kind of have to try your best. Obviously, I did a lot of student voice during my time at uni. It's something I'm quite proud of. And sometimes you take feedback to someone and just you could just see that it wouldn't necessarily get through. But you've just got to keep trying and keep being persistent, and hopefully it changes at some point, right?
Yeah, it's the thing is advocating for yourself is difficult. It's very demoralizing when you feel that it isn't going to succeed, but knowing that you kind of owe it to yourself and to the people that are coming after you to just keep trying. It may have failed the first 1,000 times. Maybe it'll get through on 1,001.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not always the most consoling thought, but it's the one that we've got.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I was going to add something there and it has escaped me. So I think maybe next question. So obviously, this show, just by the nature of it, is mainly focused on disability and neurodiversity. But throughout your time at university, you've also expressed yourself as a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. This can be quite an intersectional experience with like disability, neurodivergence. How was it as like an intersectional experience as a student in kind of two different minority groups at uni?
I think talking about intersectionality is such an interesting thing because it's about uniting different compartments of yourself. And I had never really wanted to compartmentalize myself as nobody ever wants to be one thing forever, right? Or nobody wants to be one thing, even at any given moment in time. So even before I pursued an autism diagnosis, when I was still, grappling with my mental health, experiencing that as a disability, I had always conceived of myself as just a person who happens to have mental health conditions and then also happens to be transgender. But I, during my time at university and even now, valuing the shared experience of spaces that make an effort to be intersectional. So a lot of LGBTQ plus societies have disability officers, and they really make an effort now to have events that are a bit more sensory friendly, to advocate for disabilities, to make them more accessible even for people who have physical disabilities. And often that's student led, but it's very well meaning and it's often very successful. So even just the experience of being in a space where other people acknowledge that the struggle is not isolated is one that's very uplifting and empowering. Going into a room of LGBT people or neurodiverse or disabled people, people with disabilities, knowing that you're not going to be alone we were talking about shared pain, right? And that's a really valuable thing, is knowing that you're not alone, knowing that there are other people to uplift you is something that's really valuable. It's part of the human experience, it's part of human connection. So when I was studying, I really made an effort to be involved in the LGBTQ plus community because I was proud of who I was, but it was also a really valuable experience to connect with other people who were like me and also not like me. There's a huge range of the LGBTQ plus experience, there's a huge range of the disabled experience, and occupying those spaces is a great way to find common ground with people, but also to have your eyes open to different people's experiences. Being able to share and commiserate and uplift each other, but also to learn from each other and understand that it's not just, being LGBTQ plus and having a disability, but understanding, okay, I'm approaching this from someone who very reliably passes as male. I'm approaching this as someone who is, I'm as white can be. I'm very aware of that privilege. I come from a very educated background. Going into those spaces, I think it's been a movement over the last few years of really understanding that you can't separate all of these things because people are at the heart of this, and you can't separate people out. Nobody ever is one thing in its entirety. All of these things influence each other. And so in terms of my intersectional experience, it was one that was very affirming, but also very eye-opening, understanding shared experiences, but also ways in which I was coming from things from a, in some ways, very privileged perspective, and seeing and learning about other people's perspectives was something that I still is like, I learned lessons that I'm still taking with me now about the way that existing in the world is different for a lot of different people. And I really encourage people, people who aren't members of the LGBTQ plus community, to go to ally friendly events and just to connect with people, see the broad diversity of the human experience. Because there are some struggles that are very individual, and there are some that are part of being human. And noticing that it's part of being human doesn't make the struggle any less real, but it does make it a little bit less difficult.
I don't want to use terms like, because obviously we joke to each other a lot, using terms like trauma bonding and things like that, and like pain, like affirmation through kind of mutual suffering. But I feel like, because people kind of joke about that quite a bit, I've kind of lost the vocabulary to say it in a productive way. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of the shared human experience, but sometimes that is through hardship. And to the point, in some communities, it's not necessarily made a joke of, but it's acknowledged in such a way that,
and there's
it's
something
kind
to
of
be
easier
said
to
for going,
process.
well, okay, I have to laugh about this, otherwise I'm just going to have to cry. And given the choice about a situation, I'd much rather laugh about it than cry about it.
Yeah, we definitely we shared a lot of laughter together as well, and it's been like
given
a
free
wonderful
choice
time.
Would ideally eliminate the struggles that exist rather than having to face them. But in the event of struggles, connecting with people and laughing about them makes the problem feel so much less serious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's good when you have that support network who can let you do that, because especially you don't have to mask as much and stuff as well. Yeah. And it's just
finding like-minded people, wonderful. Finding people who make you feel like the best version of yourself is something that I would encourage anyone to do in any walk of life, but definitely helped me get through all the sorts of difficult things that you experience as a part of systems that were designed for certain kinds of people and are very slow to change.
Yeah. I will say at this point, if anyone's like struggling to find a support network or dealing with those feelings of like loneliness, I'd say find local stuff, go through like your university society page and just try and find something that's active and that fits you. It's how I ended up finding like the Tea Society. I was the secretary like 2 weeks after I joined. It was wild. But I ended up meeting a load of like wonderful mutual friends as well. And it's hard when you've got to try and use that energy to take the initiative. But if anyone's struggling with that, it's something I kind of highly encourage you to do.
And there's societies for every possible thing. It doesn't have to be a sport, doesn't have to be the LGBTQ plus society. Often universities will have a kind of disabilities society or places for students with disabilities to connect with one another. But it can be anything. It could be the Tea Society. Sometimes, international students, often there will be societies for people from different regions. So at Oxford, there's an Australian New Zealand society, there's a Chinese society, there's an American society. So yeah, being able to connect with people, it feels very, very difficult and insurmountable. But once you make that step, the reward is tenfold from what you put into it.
Yeah, but there's also like faith groups and stuff like that normally.
Yeah, faith groups. Anything really. If you can imagine it, there's probably a university society for it.
Yeah, or you can make it.
Or make it.
Like that's like,
yeah. If your university doesn't have a Magic the Gathering society and you want to play Magic the Gathering with friends as a way to connect with people, make a Magic the Gathering society.
Shameful if they don't already have one. Magic's a wonderful game.
Yeah, I don't know why I made that example. I feel like a lot of universities have Magic the Gathering societies. Pick a different board game. Like Monopoly. If you really love Monopoly and you want to make friends playing Monopoly, I don't want to shame you. I have only have negative experiences with friendships playing Monopoly. But if you're one of those people that can really bond with people over the capitalist experience, make a Monopoly society.
Right. We're going to do some quick fires because we have had some wonderful tangents, but also means we're a little cut for time. But the good news is we're still talking about societies.
Yes.
Were there any club societies or initiatives that made a significant positive difference to your experience of higher education?
Yeah, already touched on the LGBTQ plus society, connecting with people, being able to be yourself in a very safe space. And then while I was at Oxford, I did a lot of fencing. I was really involved in the Oxford University Fencing Club, just as a person that was there and then as part of the leadership of that. And again, having common interests with people, connecting with people, and just doing exercise together, not taking ourselves too seriously was, I made lifelong friends there, some truly wonderful memories, and that really helped lighten the load sometimes of the burdens that you experience.
Yeah, I remember also talking to one of the people who helps run Oxford Sport, who's a mutual friend of ours, and also the fencing society's now like got a really big kind of trans contingent, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's we, while I was there, I say we, I'm not there anymore, but while I was there, it was something that the club really prided itself on, was being very accessible and open, because we train, mixed gender. Often competitions are divided, but training, you're all in together. So that was one thing that the club really prided itself on, was being very open to LGBT people. So I was always welcome there. I was men's captain there. We made sure that, trans women were made welcome. And that's, yeah, find a society that affirms who you are, be that sport or be that something else.
Absolutely. Shout out to Oxford Fencing. Everyone's pretty wonderful.
Shout out to Oxford Fencing.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Right, next question. Have you experienced any instances of your disability kind of proving helpful in higher education?
This is a difficult question to answer, because there's this whole narrative about having a disability being a superpower. I'm not sure to what extent I buy into this, but I will say this. I'm very good at pattern recognition, and I'm very good at problem solving. It's what makes me very good at solving puzzles. It's what makes me very good at deductive reasoning, those kinds of, games, problem solving games. And that is really wonderful when you're in a field that involves looking at things and seeing how they fit together. When I'm clicking, part of the hyperfocus experience is, if I can hyperfocus on writing, I'll write for hours, and the work that I'm producing is good enough work to get me into a PhD. I wouldn't say it's the greatest work ever, but it's a double-edged sword sometimes, existing. And if you can't focus, it's going horribly, it's not working. But if I set myself up for success, if I'm working well, if I'm in a position where, I've got my music playing, I'm working at the right time, I'm comfortable, I'm well fed, I can produce work that is high quality and that I can be proud of. And that, I don't think, is something that everybody can say. The ability to read into things, really dig down, question why things are the way that they are, and see how they fit together, has been something that's lent itself really well to my academic career. Being autistic is not always easy, but if I'm in a space where I'm able to manage all of the sensory sensitivities, and I'm, safe, and things are quiet, and I'm feeling good, I'm able to work to a much higher standard than I think I would be able to if I didn't see the world the way that I do.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. Right. Next question. Is there anything you wish you had known about university before starting?
It will change you, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Nobody goes into university unchanged. People who don't have disabilities, people who aren't LGBTQ+, everybody goes in as one thing and everybody comes out a different thing. Don't resist that, I think. I came in wanting to be something, ending up as something else, and being much happier with the something else that I ended up as.
Yeah. Succinct, I like it. Accurate, relatable. 10 out of 10. Right. Nearly there. So the next one, we're kind of zooming out kind of from a societal standpoint. You've kind of touched on this already, actually, with some of your bureaucratic and other pain points. But how do you think we can improve the experience of higher education as both individuals and a society?
It's a difficult question because higher education, its goals have changed over the years. Previously, it was a really kind of priestly thing. It was a very theological institution. Then it became producing sort of men of science who were really polymaths doing a lot of different things. Our modern university system, my biggest recommendation would be to really evaluate and ask the people that they're serving what it is that they want and what it is that would help them. It's very difficult sometimes to advocate for yourself on someone else's terms, to fill in the form, to have to fight and say, this lecture isn't being recorded. What can I do? I'm on exchange. Who can help me? Advocating for yourself is exhausting. The biggest thing that I would hope that is implemented in places of higher education is listening to the people that they're serving, listening to the people that they're educating, and going, how can we make this experience better for you? Actually taking the feedback that people are giving rather than dismissing them as, students who don't know better. Often the person who knows best about yourself is you. You are the person who's most informed about what you need. And I think sitting down and listening and actually making adjustments for what people are asking for is the simplest thing in the world. And it's the thing that hasn't been done and it needs to be done.
Yeah, or even if so again, I did a lot of work in student voice, and it would be a lot of, oh no, we consulted with students on this. It's like, yes, and we said the opposite, or it wasn't like what we said we don't feel was truly internalized. This needs to be,
or going partway to fixing the problem and not fixing the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
All of those things, really seeking to understand what it is that is a barrier to people, what it is that's causing people difficulty, and removing the root cause of the barrier.
Yeah, totally agree. And there's so many things that can apply to as well. Absolutely.
Oh, everywhere. Workplaces, everything.
Yeah. Try and do better, and hopefully do better, guys.
Everybody just has to try.
Yeah. No, I agree. Right. We are 1.5 questions to go. So we've also touched on this, especially kind of at the start of the show. But what are you doing nowadays, and kind of how have your past experiences affected this? And as a fun little bonus question, how have these experiences helped you kind of specifically in like a PhD academic setting?
Yeah, so mentioned at the top of the show, I'm studying for a PhD at the University of Melbourne. The past experiences I had in higher education, the negative ones aside, were positive enough that I'm back and I'm in here for another 3 or so years. The experiences that I had in the past really taught me a lot of lessons about advocating for myself, teaching myself things, and making relationships with the people who can help you. The biggest thing that got me through the difficult times at university was asking for help from people who could help me. And if they couldn't help me, saying, do you know someone who can? And so going through Oxford, making sure that I was on the best possible terms that I could be with my tutors, and if they weren't listening to me, finding someone who would, has really taught me a lot about what's the relationship that I can build with my supervisors or the people who are teaching me for my coursework, so that they best understand how it is that I learn, and I best understand what it is that they want from me in an educational setting. And that hopefully is going to set me up in really good stead to continue through as a successful PhD student, but also in a sustainable way, so that I'm not damaging myself or my health.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also just like naturally growing as well, right? Like it's also just kind of learning
Of course.
as you grow, and it's a wonderful experience. It's the human experience.
Every supervisory relationship, you come into it as strangers, and it's a navigation of boundaries. But even so, if you're a master's student, if you're doing some kind of honors thesis, if you're doing a PhD, make sure that your relationship with your supervisor is good. That's the most important relationship that you have. They can do a lot of advocating for you that you can't do for yourself. If it's a relationship that's not working, consult with the powers that be, try and fix it, try and get a new one if you have to. But make sure that if you can't advocate for yourself, someone else will do it for you.
Yeah. In kind of the name of having these nice, powerful messages, final question. So if we were to take kind of everything that you've said from today and kind of we condense it down, right? What is the one key takeaway that you would like listeners to remember from your story?
Help will sometimes fail you, but it will always fail you if you don't ask.
That's awesome. I love that. Right, Ari, we're done. We rapid fired half the questions, but we did
Thanks for having me on. I talked way too much at the start, but it's good to do rapid fire.
Yeah, no.
Really condense things down.
You know what? Absolutely my pleasure. I've been waiting to record this episode with you for a while, and I'm just glad we got to do it. Right, I'm going to do my spiel, and then we'll stop the recording. Right, so HE Enabled is a show all about sharing our experiences of neurodiversity, disability, and long-term health conditions in the British higher education system. We have wonderful people like Ari on. I try every week. Doesn't necessarily always work. But I'm always looking for people to come on and kind of share their experiences, whether you're an alum, whether you're like support staff, academic, student, whatever. If you are interested in that, you can email at henabled@gmail.com, and that is also in the show's description. Cool. Ari, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kat.
Cheers.